This is where we're going to begin our deep dive as we welcome in Michael Holley, along with our two Patriots insiders, Tom E. Curran and Phil Perry. And we would like to hear from you right off the bat. What was the biggest takeaway from the Pats preseason opener? All of the good that you saw, or was it the Maye turnover? You know what to do. Scan the QR code, go to that website, cast your vote. 72% of you with the rose-colored glasses on, only seeing the good that happened in that 48-18 drubbing. I mean, it was a preseason game. It was a preseason game. Michael Holley, what stood out to you of those two?
Well, listen,
the good or the Maye turnover?
Listen, Trenni, Phil, Tom E. Curran, it may seem unreasonable to say it's the fumble because there's so many good things that happen, including that Henderson return for a touchdown. But it is the fumble. I'm going to tell you why it's the fumble. Because Mike Vrabel is trying to develop some leadership abilities and some leadership qualities in Drake Maye. He didn't play that much on Friday night. And so in those limited opportunities, what you're looking for is him, one, to stay healthy, and two, to show some progress, to show some development from last year. And so it's what we saw from Drake Maye on Friday is what we've seen for several games last year. It's not good enough. And so, look, would I say this about Joshua Dobbs? No. Would I say this about a rookie quarterback? No. But this is the leader of your team, and he's got to show some progress. And so I'd say that stands out more than all the positive stuff.
To me, it's all the positive stuff. The reason being that mistake by Drake Maye was so easily fixable. What are you thinking about? Nothing. I have no idea. Don't do it anymore. You're going down, call it a day. It wasn't a pick in the end zone where he was trying to make a play that he couldn't necessarily make and just didn't have a clue. That's just absolutely moronic behavior, and it does not undo the 2 weeks of very good camp work, the joint practice work. To me, what stood out was the physicality of the football team in general, the cleanliness with which they played, and the fact that I think that Mike Vrabel's program is being taken to heart. So the fumble sucked. It was moronic. Don't do it anymore, but eminently fixable.
Yeah, to me, the biggest thing to come out of that game is that this is a football team that looks like it's establishing an identity, and it's an identity that Mike Vrabel wants. You saw running backs running through people's faces. You saw even diminutive receivers like Efton Chisholm lowering his shoulder instead of taking the easy way out and going out of bounds when he's running along the sideline. As Tom mentioned, it was 13-2, the penalties, and they had a couple offsetting, so the Patriots had a couple more. But in a preseason game with 90 guys on the roster, 4 flags against you, that's not bad, and that's what Mike Vrabel is looking for. So to me, the fumble and everything Michael said about it is legit, but that is a close second to the big picture of this head coach is starting to make headway and getting his team in the direction that it wants to go.
Phil, are the turnovers fixable? Because you said, Tom, it's easily fixable. But to Michael Holley's point, this is an issue that we've seen from Drake Maye dating back to last year. Now on a second, they didn't have a turnover on a second drive of the game. But as we've seen in practice the last couple of days, the turnovers have reappeared.
They have a little bit, but I would say some of those I wouldn't even fully put on him. You've seen a couple of deflections that have resulted in turnovers. To me, it's just this is who Drake is to a degree. Yes, you can dial back turnovers like the one we saw on Friday, but his confidence is a double-edged sword. It is in some ways what makes him him. You're not going to be able to see some of the tight window throws or some of the off-platform down the field heaves that result in positive things for your football team if you don't also put up with some of the other gunslingery tendencies that result in mistakes. This is the catch-22 of a young quarterback with a dynamic physical skill set. We've seen it once. We've seen it 1,000 times. And some guys end up being Hall of Famers. Some don't. And they end up washing out of the league. Where he falls on that spectrum will determine what kind of success this football team has.
I hear what you're saying, Phil. I don't think, though, that what Mike Vrabel, that response after the game, I don't think it was a performative, hey, I'm going to put on a show for the media. I think he was legitimately pissed about it. And so I'm thinking he doesn't really like the gunslinger stuff. So if he had to make a choice, he'd say, how about less gunslinger stuff and we take care of the football more? So you may have to scale back some of your base instincts to go for it. I don't want you to do that.
Does there also, though, need to be some patience, Curran? Because as someone who grew up watching Brett Favre, for a while it was maddening. And even late in his career, I think everybody remembers.
And Holmgren hated it.
Yeah.
Right? Holmgren hated that stuff.
He hated it, but it's what made him great. Like, do you just sort of have to also understand he is only a second-year player, and you can't break him of those habits immediately. There are going to be some plays that he makes that make you want to, like, tear your hair out, but there will also be plays that he makes that you say, that's a guy who could be a Josh Allen type.
It's a great example to use Brett Favre because his stuff was so preventable too, and he just continued to do it. He should have been a much more decorated quarterback than he wound up being, if you ask me, in terms of the skill and the ability to run with the football. He just could not keep himself tethered. And I do think that Maye is different in that regard. And again, every turnover has a little black box you could examine. The black box to this one just says all on quarterback, idiotic decision. And then the tipped ones we've seen during practice, Bobby Wagner gets a hand on the ball. Well, that happens. You know, you can't avoid a Hall of Fame player's hand during a practice and you get picked. That's not a big deal to me. Same thing during the inter-squad scrimmage the week before. He had one that bounced off Diggs' shoulder, not his fault. He had one that was horrendous to Alex Austin's. But it's not the litany of mistakes that we're seeing. So that's why I find it more excusable. The upshot of it is, though, you are going to have to deal with it to an extent. I think Michael's point, though, is great. Look, stop slinging guns. And just keep yourself holstered a little bit more often. Right. We don't need this the whole game.
Phil, I kind of hinted at it, but did Maye bounce back in practices? How did he look the last couple of days?
Today was a brutal period, really. It's one competitive period that they had before they get on planes tomorrow and go to Minnesota. Top offense versus top defense. He went 4 for 10. And it was ugly. There was a lot of pressure. So, again, it's not all on the quarterback. He can't make himself, the perfect offense as a singular individual. But they looked out of sorts. They looked young on the offensive line in particular. I think they were trying to get used to some things they might see in Minnesota, which is very exotic. But that, to me, is something that they're going to have to figure out. They have a young line playing in front of a young quarterback, and that could lead to a lot of mistakes.
Michael, what do you read into those comments from Mike Vrabel?
Well, I think just like everything else with Vrabel, he tells you exactly, what it is. You don't have to guess about what kind of team he wants and what his expectations are from his team leaders. I do wonder, though, and I'm trying to think of examples of good quarterbacks, really good quarterbacks, who weren't necessarily the leaders of their teams, because I wonder if Drake Maye can live up to the expectation that Mike Vrabel has for him as a leader. Now, I think he'll be a good player, but is he one of those guys who will be a good quarterback, but is not necessarily the number one guy for the Patriots? And so that's what I worry about a little bit, Phil, because I know Vrabel can. Vrabel was not the best. Here's an example, and Curran knows this better than most. Vrabel was not the best player on the Patriots ever when he was on the team, but he clearly was one of the leaders on the Patriots. Drake Maye might be one of the most talented player on the Patriots. I just don't know if he's got that leadership thing in him.
Well, I don't know if we could put a cap on him yet. I think he's about to turn 23 years old, and so this is part of the development process for him. It goes beyond finding completions and setting protections and understanding the Josh McDaniels language. It is about developing your skill set and flexing those muscles in that fashion. And I don't know if it comes incredibly naturally to him, because it does feel like every time Mike Vrabel's at a microphone, whether it's a mic'd up segment or whether he's doing an interview, he's talking about pushing Drake Maye into being more of a leader. So he's clearly, Tom, trying to draw this out of him. It's just a question of how much he gets.
And it's really interesting because I do think that Maye has all the leadership skills that you would want. Tough, mentally and physically strong. He'll stand at the front of the room. He'll call guys out. It's just Vrabel wants a certain kind of leader, it seems. He wants a demonstrative, I'm at the front of the bus, I'm waving the banner. And he's saying, it's interesting to me, it's hard to do that every day. It's hard to be up every day, grabbing people by the scruff of the neck, patting them on the ass, whatever it takes to get them engaged and involved. It's not easy. You're 22. These guys might have, 3 kids at home, and you have to be the guy to do it. So it's going to be interesting to watch how it develops, because he was very Parcellsian and Belichickian today during the practice when Maye had what seemed to be the offense, ran out of time, and Vrabel goes and points at one play clock that had gone to 0. He goes and points at the other play clock that had gone to 0. And he's basically saying, what is wrong with you people? Have you never seen these before?
Well, let me ask you a quick question. Is quiet leadership a thing? Because I thought of a guy. Here's a guy. A champion, Troy Aikman.
Yeah.
So Troy Aikman, tough, quiet leader, champion, but it's Michael Irvin and Emmitt Smith who are more demonstrative. Does quiet leadership work for the quarterback position in 2025? I think it does, but it seems like Vrabel is like, I need more.
I don't know. I think it helps to be quiet when you got Emmitt Smith and like a bunch of Hall of Famers on the offensive line.
I feel like Maye's probably like 6 or 7 right now, and Mike wants it on 10. at all times. So maybe it's just to push him up to that point.